Imagine losing more than half of your home in a single day. For the nation of Mexico, that wasn't a nightmare, it was a brutal reality. In 1848, the Mexican-American War ended with Mexico giving up over 55% of its territory to the United States. Today, iconic places like California, Texas, Arizona, and Nevada are American, but they used to be Mexican. So how did this happen? It wasn't just a stronger army winning a war. It was the result of a series of terrible decisions, personal egos, and a massive political gamble that failed. The trouble began with a heated border dispute in Texas. Texas had recently joined the United States, but no one could agree on where the border actually was. The United States claimed it was the Rio Grande River. Mexico insisted it was the Nueces River, much farther north. That disagreement created a huge stretch of disputed land between them. President James K. Polk wanted that land, and he also wanted the ports of California. He first tried to buy the territory for $30 million. The Mexican government, feeling insulted, refused to even meet with his representative. That was the first fatal decision. Mexico was financially broke and politically unstable, yet its leadership chose a path that led straight toward a war they couldn't afford, instead of attempting serious negotiation. When fighting broke out in 1846, the Mexican government made another desperate choice. They brought back Antonio López de Santa Anna from exile in Cuba. Santa Anna was a famous general and a former president, but he was also known for being unreliable. To return to Mexico, he secretly made a deal with the Americans. He convinced President Polk that if the U.S. Navy allowed him through their blockade, he would arrange a peace treaty favorable to the United States. The plan worked. The Americans let him pass. But once Santa Anna set foot on Mexican soil, he betrayed them. He ignored the agreement and took command of the Mexican army to fight the very people who had helped him return. However, Santa Anna's leadership soon proved disastrous for his own country. He was personally brave, but his tactical decisions were often driven by ego. The best example was the Battle of Buena Vista. Santa Anna commanded a much larger force than the American army led by Zachary Taylor. Mexican troops fought hard and were close to victory. The Americans were nearly forced into retreat. Then, suddenly, and without a clear military reason, Santa Anna ordered his army to withdraw. He claimed he needed to return to Mexico City to deal with a political uprising. That decision threw away a victory that could have changed the war's outcome. His soldiers were left exhausted and confused, and the momentum shifted permanently to the Americans. As the American army advanced deeper into the country, the Mexican leadership continued fighting among themselves. Even with the enemy approaching the capital, different generals focused more on political power than national survival. This lack of unity made it easier for General Winfield Scott to land his troops and move toward Mexico City. In September 1847, after a series of bloody battles, the American flag was raised over the National Palace. The war was effectively over, and because Mexico's leaders couldn't agree on a unified strategy, they had lost any real leverage in negotiations. The final outcome was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. The terms were devastating. Mexico had to recognize the loss of Texas and sell California, along with the rest of the Southwest, for just $15 million. That was only half of what the United States had originally offered before the war began. To make matters worse, just weeks before the treaty was signed, gold was discovered in California. Because of the fatal decision to choose a hopeless war over diplomacy, Mexico lost the greatest gold rush in history and its chance to become the dominant power in North America. The Mexican-American War was more than a military defeat. It was a collapse of leadership. If the Mexican government had been more stable, or if Santa Anna had placed his country above his own ambition, the map of the world might look very different today. This tragedy reminds us that in history, being morally right is not enough. preparation and unity matter more. A single decision to reject negotiation and choose confrontation instead ended up costing Mexico more than half of its land and reshaping its future forever. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's darkest strategic failures, make sure to subscribe to History's Fatal Decisions. We have more stories of empires, errors, commercial disasters, and the human cost of bad leadership coming soon.